Well, Celtics fans, another season is in the books. Seems like not that long ago I was talking about the Celtics making the playoffs, and now, well, they're out of it. But I mean, really, I guess you had to temper your expectations. You'd have to be the greatest optimist in the world to think that the Celtics could win even 2 games in that series against Cleveland, let alone, win it. So again, am I disappointed? A little bit, but I can't say the Celtics weren't competitive. I never felt like they were completely out of the games, they lost every game, but even in those games, they were within 5, 6 points toward the end of the game. And I mean, you look at the team, you look at what they have, and basically it comes back to what have we learned? I mean, honestly, even during the regular season when they were doing well, they'd get smoked by a team like Golden State or the Clippers. And there's a reason for that. It's quite obvious, really. They're just not on that level yet. And I don't know if they will be on that level next year, the year after that. Again, it just goes back to a lot of different things. But it was, this season was a moral victory, if nothing else. That's how I look at it. They won 40 games. I don't think anybody expected them to win 40 games. I don't think anyone expected them to make the playoffs. And, once they made it, it was kind of just gravy from there. And I got to give Brad Stevens a lot of credit. It was a season that, just kind of frustrated the hell out of me to start with, because it was another season where it wasn't even what the team's record was. It was the fact that Danny Ainge just seemed determined to jettison off anyone with talent, trade players for players, then trade those players for more players, trade those players for draft picks, and trade for more players. It just seemed like, and it still seems like, by the way, still seems like Danny Ainge has no plan. I think Brad Stevens, the reason he was so successful in the second half of the season is because there was no trading deadline, to be quite honest. I think once they got Isaiah Thomas, and that was the last trade they made, they were able to kind of keep the same roster for more than a week, and he was able to work with them. And I think that's what needs to continue happening. So I'm kind of worried now that, Danny Ainge is going to trade Evan Turner, trade Jay Crowder, trade anyone that has any value whatsoever to get more draft picks. And okay, draft picks are all cool and all, but the Celtics don't need draft picks. The Celtics need players. They need players that we've heard of. I hate to say it, but they need stars. I'm not naive to that. The Celtics this year, they won 40 games. They made it into the playoffs as a 7th seed. But, you had no faith in them making it past the first round, nor should you have. Interestingly enough, the Celtics, when they had Pierce and Garnett a few years back for their last year together, they were also a 7th seed. They only won 42 games. But you'd have to like the Celtics' chances better back then, even though Garnett and Pierce weren't what they once were. But, you liked their chances better. Of course, they also lost in the first round. But my point is, it really does kind of matter, the personnel on the field. You look at the Spurs, they win anywhere from 45 to 60 games every year. And no matter where they finish in the standings, nobody wants to play them because they have established veterans. They have, and they're not even superstars. Tim Duncan in his day was, don't get me wrong, but it's just kind of just having the right players, having above average talent. Yeah, it'd be great to have a LeBron James or a Kevin Durant, but there are teams that don't have those players that are still pretty decent. And I feel like the Celtics could get there. I just feel like, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, I just don't think Danny Ainge has a plan. I really don't. I think Isaiah Thomas was a pleasant surprise. I really don't want them to trade him, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. And again, I just like to see Danny Ainge do something that wasn't just luck-based or wasn't just, hey, let's try and get in the draft lottery. I think he's probably mad, actually, that the Celtics made the playoffs because it was kind of, a short-lived playoff run. But again, I'm not going to get into the heads of Danny Ainge right now. It's just kind of a moment to kind of reflect on the season, to realize that the Celtics did play really well down the stretch. But, you look at their schedule. They played the Bucks. They played the Pacers. They played the Bobcats, etc. Not the Bobcats, the Hornets. And again, even with that, though, you have to remember that those teams, as lousy as they were also trying to get into the playoffs. So it's not like they were playing teams that weren't trying. They were playing legitimate competition. Unfortunately, when they played the legitimate competition who, had all their firepower, like Cleveland, they didn't quite get over the hump. But I can't really fault them for that. This is really a weird thing for me. Normally I'd be disappointed that my team lost in the first round of the playoffs, but the Celtics were expected to be so bad that this is good. And, next year, I don't know. I could see them winning, 40, 45 games, or I could see them winning less than that. It depends on what they do in the offseason. Even if they don't do anything, I think they'll be a little better than they were this year. There's got to be a certain extent, a certain level of just development among the young players. Marcus Smart, Tyler Zeller, all those kind of no-names right now. They've got to step up into something, even if it's not, next-tier superstar level. You got to be a little patient with them, and I think Evan Turner has shown some promise. I think, Marcus Smart defensively has shown a lot of promise. Maybe next year he gets it all together. Again, you don't know. Rajon Rondo wasn't anything great his first couple of years. So, you got to wait and see, and that's why I kind of worry about Danny Ainge just doing what he does and just flipping everybody for draft picks. And then what do you get with these draft picks? We'll see. But again, just kind of letting that all go. I've mentioned this before. I'll mention it again. I really wish Danny Ainge had acquired some other talent to put around Pierce and Garnett toward the end of their careers with Boston. I'm not saying high-end talent, but it would have been nice to get some younger pieces or maybe some free agents. I'm not saying he didn't try. It always seemed like the Celtics, for the last 3-4 years that Pierce, Garnett, and even Ray Allen were on the team, they were just kind of trying to win that year, which is great, but they weren't really doing anything for the future. They would sign someone like Rasheed Wallace or Shaq, who had 1 year left in their career. So when Pierce and Garnett ended up getting traded, you had nothing left. And again, I know that's kind of the nature of the beast, but I feel like some teams set themselves up better than others. I mean, the Lakers haven't. I mean, Kobe's aged, and now they don't really have anyone else. And you look at some other teams, but I feel like the Spurs, I mentioned the Spurs, I feel like even when Duncan is ineffective, when he's in his 40s, I feel like they'll have other options. I don't see the Spurs going into this big rebuilding mode. I think they draft well, which is tough to do because they're always winning. So why can't the Celtics draft well if they're always losing? Whatever. But anyway, next season is another season. I will see you then.